Right, over to you, Sean. Round of applause for Sean.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about one of the polymaths that I think is really cool. His name is Christopher Alexander. So more about him later. First, I want to say that his work kind of helps us solve some problems with like modern culture. So even with all the education and science and medicine that we have, the modern world is still a pretty unsatisfactory place. So all you have to do is like look at our art and literature and see that throughout it there are all these themes of isolation and loneliness, despair, feelings of feeling lost and without a purpose. And so Christopher Alexander can help us understand maybe where some of this is coming from. So he started off in Cambridge in physics and chemistry, studied math a little bit, wasn't really sure what he wanted to do, ended up getting a BA in architecture, stayed on, got a master's in math, then actually went on to get the first PhD in architecture from Harvard. So this was, I think, in the 50s or 60s. So as you can imagine, probably nobody gets PhDs in architecture because it's a really practical field. People don't really do research in architecture. They just go study the forms, like learn how to do it, and then they go do it. But he wanted to actually start thinking about it as a more theoretical field. And he wanted to take knowledge from other sciences and see how he could improve the way we do architecture. So one of the important ideas that he gave us is that we can understand some of the psychological problems we have by understanding the built environment around us. That something about the way buildings are constructed and the way our communities are organized are like deeply important for our psychology. So once we understand this, we can start asking questions like, why do we feel alienated in towering corporate office buildings? Why do we feel bored in suburbs? Why is going to the grocery store such a chore sometimes? Why don't we have meaningful relationships with our neighbors usually? So the place that he felt that you should start is noticing that cities designed in the Middle Ages are some of the most beautiful and most livable in the world. Like, how many people do you know that would love to go to Florence or Venice or Copenhagen? And when they do studies about like happiness, they find that people in cities like this tend to be more relaxed, feel that their lives are more fulfilling. So when he started looking into it, he found that at the time that these cities were designed, people in communities had a lot more control over their houses and the buildings in their communities and how that was all organized. So his central thesis is that people should design their own homes and communities. And like this seems kind of crazy, right? Because like none of us know anything about architecture. I don't know anything about architecture. It seems like a really specialized field. Like it seems like there's no way that I would be able to design my own house. But he thinks you can. So in his 1977 book, A Pattern Language, he's really trying to break down what architecture and urban design are all about into like the fundamental patterns that make it up. So each of these patterns is going to be something like a suburb, or a four-way intersection, or row house, or apartment building. They're just like things that you see, like you can maybe think of like memes in like science or something like that. They're just they're like basic units that make up any kind of like home or city or organizational structure. So just to give you an example, okay, yeah. So he does a lot of he brings in like not only architecture and mathematics, right? Like those make sense going together kind of, but also a lot of like the social sciences, anthropology, sociology, history, psychology. And so for each of these like patterns, in his book he gives you examples of them and tells you why they're good or why they're bad. So for example, one of the patterns he gives is 4-story residential building. He says that nobody should be living in a building that's more than 4 stories tall. And the reason this is because about the height of a 4th-story apartment is about the last height that you can still recognize people's faces on the ground. So at that height, you can look out, you can like see your neighbors walking by and like recognize them and shout down to them, and you're still connected with them that way. But if you go to the 5th story or higher, they just become blurry faces. If you get high enough, it's just like ants kind of like moving around doing their thing, and it doesn't seem like they're connected to you at all. And so when you're that high up, like it's really isolated. You don't really feel connected to what's happening around you. And actually, they've done studies and they found that if you live in a high-rise apartment building above the 4th floor, they actually have higher incidences of mental health issues and depression and stuff like that. So another pattern that he talks about is like residential dwellings. So one of the first kind of dwellings that a lot of human civilizations had was the longhouse. And as you can see, it's like a pretty primitive structure. But the cool thing about it is that up to 20 families would live in it at a time. And it was much more communal. They would live together, work together, and it was kind of like the focus of their society. So this is pretty different from the way we live now, like huge suburbs of like single family dwellings. And so one of the points that he makes is that this isn't really natural for us. Like this isn't really, it's a pretty new development in human civilization, and maybe not a good one. Maybe it's better for us to live more communally. So suburbs, like in urban design, is actually one of the worst things. Like pretty much everyone that's doing urban design would agree that this is something that never should have happened, and which we should try to get rid of if we possibly can. Because, so you're living in houses that more or less are the same as the other houses, you lose your sense of like identity, your home doesn't become like a special place to you. And it also, there's a lot of like concrete, a lot of asphalt, that's not really good for us, like we need grass and like open spaces. And also, there's no communal space for you to come together with your neighbors. There's no place where you'll just run into them, or where there's like something to do where you can just like go see other people. You're all just like separated in your tiny boxes. And also, like, it makes you feel bored because there's nothing to do in a suburb, right? Like, anytime you want to do anything, you have to drive for 10 to 20 minutes. So this isn't really the way that we should be doing it. And Alexander explains why some of this stuff has happened. So the human brain tends to think really modularly. So when we look at a city, we want to separate it up into functional blocks. We want to put, like, industry and factories, like, in one area, and then, like, the business and financial district and office buildings in another area, entertainment, food, and another shopping in another area. And then like over here, here's where we'll put people. This is where residences will be. And Alexander argues that this isn't the way we should be thinking about cities at all. What cities should be is a web of interlapping functionality. So instead of having all these functions separated, we should put them all together in a neighborhood. He thinks that you should be able to walk to pretty much anything you need to do. So in your neighborhood, you would be living in the same places where there's food, where there's shopping, where there's entertainment, things to do. He thinks that your work, you shouldn't have to drive to work really. He thinks that work should be within walking distance. And also schools. He thinks that lunchtime should be a time when like the parents can come home from work, and they can come home from school, and like the family should be able to eat lunch together. What else was I going to say about this? So anyway, yeah, so it's like, you can see now like these patterns are kind of being used. Like if you go to like Chicago or something like that, there's like a lot of neighborhoods where there's like different food. And it's based on like the culture of the neighborhood, right? Like all of this he thinks is good. He thinks that people should live around people that are similar to them. That's one of the reasons that suburbs are so bad. It's because you don't really have anything in common with your neighbors other than that you're like roughly the same socioeconomic status. So he thinks that community should be built around something that's important to the community. So if you have like maybe like a preschool or something, then the people that are like living around there are gonna have like young kids, and so that brings them together. Or you put maybe like a church in like a community, and then all the people that are like in that same religion kind of like flock to like that neighborhood. And so this way, you're looking around people that have an interest with you, it like makes you happier, and like the resources that you need are right there. So if you have like an Orthodox church, then like everyone that's like Orthodox can kind of like live in like that neighborhood, and like other people might be far away from the Orthodox church, but like they don't need to go there, so it's not that big of a deal. Also, one of the really cool things about his work is that it connects really well with the completely seemingly unrelated field of computer science. And so yeah, you might think that's really weird. But actually, at the same time, like in the 70s when he's writing, computer scientists are facing a really hard issue, right? It's like that's the beginning of personal computing, computers are becoming more powerful, we have to write more sophisticated programs, we have to think about like how we're going to organize them in more complicated systems. And his work actually really helped with that. Because just like he broke down architecture and urban design into these like fundamental patterns, so too software engineers broke down fundamental patterns of like computer programs, and that helped them design better and more robust programming languages. So actually the invention of object-oriented programming, the people that were starting with that like were reading Alexander's work. And actually one of his like earlier, smaller books used to be required reading in computer science departments. And he actually taught computer science at MIT for a while. So it's just something that like he was doing his own thing, and then he ran into some computer scientists, and they're just like, shit, like this is really useful for us. And that collaboration started. Also, the whole idea of breaking up these like modular components and like distributing it throughout the city, that was like hugely influential in computer science as well. Because the way things were working before, you didn't have, computers were really expensive, right? So you would have like one good computer that was like a big mainframe that did all your processing, and then like the cheaper, not as good computers would just interact with that mainframe. But as computers got more powerful, we could start inventing distributed systems that distributed all those resources among the computers. And that's a big trend in computer science as well. And also, this is both happening at Berkeley. He's a professor there, and a lot of research at that time was happening at Berkeley also. Yeah, so I just want to end by saying that the crucial thing about his work is that by better understanding the relationship between our minds and the things around us, we can design better communities and ultimately happier societies. And also a quote by Pope Francis. Nowadays, we're conscious of the disproportionate and unruly growth of many cities, which have become unhealthy to live in. Not only because of pollution caused by toxic emissions, but also as a result of urban chaos, poor transportation, and visual pollution and noise. We are not meant to be inundated by cement, asphalt, glass, and metal, and deprived of physical contact with nature. I think that's something Christopher Alexander would really do. So, thank you.